Hello, how's it going everyone? I'm Carlo from AYCB and I'm here today with my cousin Dylan.
Hello, hello.
And we are going to be previewing Three Sisters, which is a strategic roll and write game that is on Kickstarter as of March 9th. This is designed by Ben Pinchback and Matt Riddle. If you recognize those names, because they've designed a bunch of games over the last 10, 12 years or so, including Fleet the dice game. They did Stellar, which was an awesome two-player card game that we really loved from last year. And this is actually the first published game under their new company, Motor City Gameworks. I want to mention real quick, this is a prototype copy, so keep in mind that the components you see here won't necessarily be the final versions. I also want to point out the beautiful artwork on the cover by Beth Sobel, and the sheets themselves were done by Marley's Barons. So Dylan's going to talk a bit more about what you do in this game, but just to give you an idea, the Three Sisters is an indigenous agricultural technique that's still very commonly used today, and it kind of refers to pumpkins, beans, and corn, and they kind of work together to sort of provide everything a garden needs to grow. So yeah, why don't you tell us a bit about the overview and kind of how the game works?
Yeah, for sure. First thing I'll mention before I jump into that is just a quick disclaimer for full disclosure. I did work on the intro Kickstarter video that you'll see on their page. It's the one that sort of like describes the game and gives you a little rundown of everything that's there. So I was hired to do that video, but I'm not actually involved with the Three Sisters development. So we received this prototype to do a how to play video as well as this preview video. These are our full honest thoughts. That was a separate freelance project that I worked on. So just full disclaimer, in case you see me on the page as one of the contributors and you're wondering why I'm previewing my own game, I am not involved with the game. I just did the intro video. So let's jump into the sort of little overview and break down the rules. I'll give you a quick little overview. There will be a full how to play video that will be up, that it might already be up when you're watching this, that you can check out if you want to get a full breakdown of how to play. But generally, you're going to be having these dice that are placed on this rondelle. Who's the first player is going to roll them. And when you take a die, you're going to be essentially getting two actions. One that's based on the value of the die, and one that's based on the space on the rondelle that it's occupying. And based on those two actions, you're going to be accomplishing stuff on your sheets, marking off X's, and eventually comboing things that you do into different territories and different areas on your sheet. So that's a big part of the game, is that usually when you do something, it's going to lead to something else happening in a different section, and then that could lead to something else. Especially later in the game, you're going to be comboing things sort of like one after the other. That's a big part of the game. That's generally the main flow of the game. A lot of what you're learning is just how every area functions and how they, what the best strategy is in terms of getting from one area to the other with your X's. But it basically just all comes down to taking a die and taking two actions. And that's basically the full, quick little overview. But again, we'll have a full how to play video, might already be up, that you can check out to get a full rundown of everything.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention quickly that there's, our how to play video might not cover it in detail, but there's a solo mode as well that comes in this. And basically the solo mode has an extra little set of rules that involves basically the pawn that represents Farmer Edith here. You're playing against her, and she's basically going to be taking actions against you where when her turn activates, you're going to be crossing things off of your sheet, making it a lot tougher. So it's an element that doesn't come into play when you're playing with other players. People are never crossing stuff off your sheet. So the solo mode is definitely like a different style of game, and it gives you something new to look at. So it's really interesting. I definitely recommend you check it out.
And it's great that it plays solo. I think we're seeing more games on Kickstarter these days play solo just because of what's happened in the world the last year. I think more games need to have that solo functionality to make sure people can play them.
Exactly.
So it's cool that it includes it, and it's cool that it's not just like a carbon copy of the base rules. That there is this twist that you feel like you're playing a different version of the game a little bit.
Right.
So
speaking of which player counts? So we've had a chance to try out a couple different player counts. Obviously somewhat limited due to the pandemic, but what do you think about the different player counts so far in terms of how similar the game is, or which way you do or don't like it as much?
Yeah, I think so far, based on what we've played, it plays great at all the player counts. It's not like it feels like a drastically different game or a better or worse experience necessarily. I do think that it's probably something I prefer to play at lower player counts, like 2, just based on the fact that there's so much happening on your turn, especially in the later turns with comboing, that you can sort of get to this point where everyone's just, saying out loud, oh, and then I'm going to do this, and that's going to trigger this, and then actually that's going to make me do this on my apiary, and you can't go and focus on everyone's sheets, and obviously you're probably hoping to be playing this with someone that you trust, that you're not, they're not going to screw up a rule or on purpose do something that they shouldn't. But regardless, it just feels like there's more to manage and there's more going on that it can get a little bit, feel like a little bit of just a cluster a little bit. Like there's so much happening. Whereas with 2 players, you're only managing the one person you're playing with. So you can very easily just sort of like look over and say, oh, this is what they're doing. I need to try to do this. Or, oh, it's interesting. They're going very hard in their apiary and I'm going very hard in the garden or something. Yeah. But with 4 players, there's that less interest level because you just can't keep track.
Right.
So.
And I think even with the higher player counts, it does lead to a little more downtime because it's not one of those roll and writes where like everything's happening simultaneously. Like if, so even if there's 4 players as opposed to 2, you're waiting longer between turns as well. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I've enjoyed it most with 2 players. I technically haven't tried it with 3, but I imagine 3 might be that sweet spot between 2 and 4, where maybe you get a bit more of the dynamic of having the other player, but without it slowing down the game too much. So why don't we get into then talking about basically what this is called a strategic roll and write, which you don't often hear. Roll and writes these days, a lot of the time we hear them as kind of like filler games. A lot of people dismiss them as not really being, not having substantial enough decisions or having too much randomness. So let's maybe talk about what makes this a strategic roll and write and what sets it apart. So do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, the dice are being rolled. That's where the roll comes in. But you're picking dice, and you're going to have an option of which dice you're choosing. So right from the very first get-go, your decision is going to be based on which action on the Rondell board and which number on the die is most going to, help you in what you're trying to accomplish or lead to the most combos. But even beyond that, there's so many areas that you're monitoring on your sheet that you're constantly saying, where am I going to invest my time? And even in the shed, there's so many different items and powers and different things like that you can't do them all. So which ones are you going to do that'll facilitate the strategy you're going with? And that strategy is going to be formed by which dice are available. So I feel like every game is going to feel a little bit different based on which dice are left for you, which dice, where the dice end up, the values on them, and just sort of how the game presents opportunities for you and how you jump at them, and then let that form your strategy. So I think that's where the strategic element comes in a little bit. Beyond that, there's just a lot more going on in this as a roll and write than other roll and writes I play. I'll compare it to like That's So Clever because it's one of the more popular roll and writes we've seen in the last little bit. But that one is very much you roll your dice, and whatever the numbers you end up with are, you're picking one. It's a game you can kind of sit back, relax, and just do it. I don't want to say mindless because there's still thought process there, but I would say there's more of a little bit of a luck element, and you're just
definitely
sort of rolling with the punches.
Yeah, you're not you don't pull out your roll and write sheet and say this game I'm going to go for this color or try and do this. You're just like, let's roll the dice and react to what happens. Yes. Whereas in this, like even after playing the first time, we looked at it and we're like, okay, next time I want to try like, having the seed spreader right from the start in the shed and like try to plant more, or like, so you really are going to pick a strategy from the start and try and like kind of go all in on that and see where that path takes you. So the games are going to feel a lot more different from one game to another, I find, than other roll and writes where you're just kind of like picking numbers, filling in boxes, triggering a random combo. Not to say I don't like those roll and writes, but that's where the strategic element comes in here, is like actually picking a lane and kind of focusing on it for the course of the game, and just like you almost live and die by that at a certain point, right?
One thing I'll point out, jumping into some of the things that maybe don't like as much, is just I hesitate to say I don't like it as much because it didn't ruin the experience. It's more just something that I noticed in all the plays that I had, is that there is this sort of overwhelming sense of like, there's so many boxes, there's so many things, and like it's exciting too because you have so many opportunities and you have so many options to go for. But at the same time, it can be hard to find your focus a little bit in like early on, and the game will guide you a little bit. But I just found that like with other roll and writes, there is part of the reason I play roll and writes sometimes is you play them to roll dice, and then there's a bit of a luck element, but you see what you can do with those dice that you're presented, the numbers you're presented, and you turn those into gold, or you fail at what you want to do and you try again in another game. This one, it felt like, again, because it's strategic, you're going to feel overwhelmed, especially the first couple times you played, probably more than you're expecting to out of a roll and write. And so it's not quite a bad thing, because I think that's great for a genre that normally doesn't present that many options to have that. It's just something that if you come in just saying, oh, I love roll and writes, I know what I'm going to get with this, you might be a little bit shocked to see that, like, wait, where should I be putting my first X? And like, why am I making so many decisions on round two? Like, am I making the wrong decisions? I think you have to make sure you're presenting this roll and write to the right crowd. Not to say that like it's not hard to learn, very easy to learn. It's just there going to be this barrier that surprises some people, I think.
Right. No, I think that's a good point, and I definitely agree with you in the sense that not only is there a lot going on, but sometimes you'll check something off that'll trigger like 2 or 3 things at once. And sometimes for me, it's like keeping track of the order that things have happened. Like you have the spots where when you fill in the 2 pumpkins, you get the perennial in between. But let's say you're filling in a pumpkin that already has a pumpkin completed on either side of it. Which perennial do you pick first? So then you pick one, and then you go check off the section on your perennial sheet, and that triggers like a shed action. So now are you going to pick that shed action and trigger that first, or are you going to go back and finish the other perennial that you picked, right? So, and then sometimes there's like, oh, did I forget, or did I remember to do that other thing that triggered, or did I cross that off last turn? So there's a bit of that kind of like, you have to make sure you're doing it properly. But there is a little journal section on the sheet, which is useful for taking little notes, which is nice, and whatnot. And the garden spaces are ordered by number, so there's little things guiding you on what order to do things, but it's not always super easy to follow, and it might trip you up, and you might not always play by the rules 100% just because you might miss a little thing here and there. But other than that, it's pretty smooth. So maybe now let's talk about who this game is or isn't for. Do you want to start? Tell us maybe what kind of who would like this game.
I mean, as a fan of roll and writes, I think anyone who enjoys that aspect of like not having a crazy amount of rules to understand, it really comes down to picking dice or rolling dice and what you do with those numbers. I think you're still gonna enjoy this game, appreciate this game. I think that even though it's a heavier roll and write, I don't think it's gonna completely alienate people who just like roll and writes for usually what is more of a simplistic genre. I will say that the strategic elements and all the thinking and the fact that you making the wrong decisions and spreading yourself too thin or not committing can actually hurt your score and come back to punish you more than you would expect from other roll and writes, where it comes down to, I just didn't get the dice this time. It'll come down to more your decisions not being good enough. I think that for some people who are wanting a more relaxed experience with a roll and write, that could be something that, is a little bit more disappointing to them or catches them off guard, that they might not enjoy it as much as they would a game like That's So Clever or whatever. I think that games like, Welcome To, which is another heavier-ish roll and write compared to a game like That's So Clever. There's more strategy there, and I've had games where I write a certain number in on a street and I completely ruin what I want to do and I have to adapt. I think that this game's not quite as punishing as that, but at the same time, if you realize, wow, I've committed completely to perennials and now I'm running out of ways to get the top on each of these columns, I'm going to get no points from perennials, it can feel like you've lost the game and it's your own doing, which sometimes feels bad. So it really depends what you're going for out of a roll and write. Like, if a roll and write to you is a game that is meant to be a little bit more, laid back, playing it on a couch, like, again, not having to think as much, having some fun with what the dice ended up as, and like, oh, look at the great score we got because these dice rolled in our favor. This is probably not going to be the roll and write for you, but if you've always wanted something deeper in a roll and write, then I think this is exactly the game you're probably looking for. Yeah,
and you know what I have to say is, like, just sort of came to mind right now is the garden theme kind of applies in the sense that, like, this game is a bit like gardening. Gardening's not just going to happen. It's not an easy thing. Like, you have to put in some work. This is going to be a bit of a brain burner. Again, even just to like get the rules under your belt the first time, there's a bit more maybe like work required or learning to get into it, but the reward is definitely higher than all those other roll and writes that we play regularly. I think like this might not be one that I would log like 100 plus plays like the app of Double So Clever, because that plays in like 10 minutes, but I'm not gonna, sometimes you play those other roll and writes and you don't feel satisfied after you play once because it was just a 10-minute kind of like rolling dice fest kind of thing. Whereas this feels like every time I've played it, I've felt really satisfied, but I've still had that kind of addictive roll and write feeling where you're like, you're already looking at the sheet trying to think, what are you going to do differently next time? How are you going to, which other paths are you going to try, or how are you going to better optimize the path you already, tried this one time? If you're the type of person who thinks, if I'm going outside a roll and write that's a light game, then I want an actual like board game and I don't want to sit there with pen and paper, might not be for you. But yeah, otherwise I think it's a great game and an awesome addition to the roll and write genre. Definitely one of the better ones I've played. Yeah, totally agree. And it does a really good job of implementing the theme, I should say, by the way. The whole garden area and how you plant your seeds and you water, and the events that come up with the rain affecting the whole garden. The thematics are great. The backstory behind the name and everything all ties in really great. The whole thing just fits together like a glove. So. Yeah, it is always nice comparing everyone's sheets at the end of the game, and everyone does have their own little version of their unique backyard garden, which is cool. So, and everyone you really do focus on different things. In other roll and writes, sometimes everyone is focused on the same things, just doing them better or worse. This one, we've looked at our sheets and said, wow, you completely went on a different strategy than me, which is the most fun result out of board games in general, seeing how everyone got to their end result, how you got to victory. I feel like you get more of that here than you would out of other roll and writes, and you have more control of it, so it feels better. Right? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if this sounds like something at all that would interest you, definitely check this out on Kickstarter and consider backing it. we're curious to hear what you thought. Yeah, any initial questions, thoughts, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. Ask us a question if you'd like.
We'll put the Kickstarter link in the
Yes.
in the description as well. So if you want to find it, give that a link, check it out for yourself.
Absolutely, and it should be on Kickstarter for a few weeks. So otherwise, that's it for our preview video. Again, I'm Carlo. This is Dylan. All you can board. And, how you can board.
We do teach you how you can board as well.
New channel coming up soon. No. All you can board, and yeah, that's about it. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.